And the other thing, maybe it's time for you to start over. The accumulation
Ooh.
of old shit, I don't know. I don't know.
Maybe it's time for me to start over the accumulation of old shit. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
That's a good mantra. If at first you don't succeed, or even if you do succeed, eventually you'll find yourself full of old shit, and then you
Yeah.
could start over.
And then you start over. Exactly. Welcome to the What's Your Baseline podcast, where we demystify enterprise architecture and business process management.
We're here to bring best practices and lessons learned from our years to your ears, as well as interviewing friends we've met along the way on our professional journeys.
My name is Roland and I'm joined today by my co-host, J-M. Hey, J-M, how are you doing today?
I am doing great, Roland. And I got to tell you, I'm really excited for this episode. My goodness, this is a one with just you and me. So sorry,
It's
folks out
incredible.
there who are expecting another guest on the show today. Sometimes Roland and I like to talk, just the two of us. But today's topic is pretty fun. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing good, but you're fully aware that now the retention of our audience, immediately dropped when you said, oh, it's just the two of us,
Oh, it's okay. Listen, we're going to have a lot of fun today. And in particular, today we're going to talk about something that you've been working on for quite some time. So, for those who are out there, if you've been following along with What's Your Baseline and sort of watching what'syourbaseline.com or watching our LinkedIn, you'll see that there's a lot of things that have been in the works. Earlier this year, we announced What's Your Baseline LLC, the company. And it's a natural evolution to start talking about how philosophy and products come together. And today's episode is a very special one for Roland, but also for me. This is the accumulation of a lot of years of experience of trying to figure out what's necessary to bring together for BPM in what, Roland, you're calling BPM OS. So without further ado, because there's no bucket list items or introduction of guests, hi, I'm J-M, that's Roland. Um, Roland, I'm going to be interviewing a lot today, and sort of taking your ideas and thoughts and try to coalesce them to something people can actually use pretty much immediately, and how they can move forward towards a more functional BPM practice, and platforming the methodologies that go along with that. So let's first start with the use cases, because before we even get into the how we're going to tackle it, let's define our problems. So, Roland, when you take a look at BPM practices, or just the idea of approaching the structuring of an organization, the various processes that occur within that organization, how they're supported by people and technology, where they're evaluated in metrics, where their risks are allocated, what are the big problems you see in how people conceptualize this information, how they capture the information, and how they use that information?
I see a pattern in organizations, and I spoke about that at the ABPMP chapter that
Oh,
I spoke about
good
2 weeks
pitch for
ago,
the
3 weeks ago,
ABPMP.
whatever. Yes. So thanks, Mark Shazik, by the way, for the invitation. I see the problem that BPM programs or architecture programs fail because they see it as an IT exercise. Let's buy a platform, doesn't matter which one, right? I don't want to go down that route. We're not that Catholic here. So buy a platform and you're good. Give me the licenses and then go out of your way. And I think that cuts it short, because what those organizations don't understand, and I don't want to go into the full lecture, is that you need a little bit more than just the content that you want to create, your process mining analysis, your diagrams, your process automation, whatever, your risk and compliance stuff. That's just one thing. That's built into those platforms. But to stand up that capability, you need a little bit more. And the two things, and I said it on the podcast more often than I might want to, but obviously people need to hear it. There's obviously the governance, right? Which is the first and foremost question. What are we going to do? Right. And then everything falls from there. Which roles do we need, which org structures, which training, whatever. Right. And then speaking of the people side of the house, the adoption. Right. How do I communicate? What do I need to know? Right. So content, governance, adoption. Those are the three things. I think the big problem that I see is that many organizations just look at the content side and have some some idea about, I think we need some rules of engagement, we need somehow to agree who's doing what, but then stop. And my thought was, wait a sec. If you don't know what you do, well, how do you build the structures? How do you build the IT support for this? Now you're solely relying on the platform that you bought, which by definition has a finite feature set, which is, by the way, not meant to operate a BPM or architecture capability, right?
Yeah.
So what I did is, and J-M, you've seen that, in
Yeah.
good professional deformation, I opened a modeling tool and I created a big value chain, right? And I said, okay, what are those activities that are supported in the platforms, right? Create model, approve it, release it, capture feedback. Well, that's the first question. Importing stuff. Yes, but there's something more to do. Oh, automate things. Analyze, whatever. All those things that you do in there. And then I added if you think about this as the circle in the middle, and then I added a layer around it. And I said, okay, what are the activities that you do around it? So for example, you need to come up with a strategy. You need to come up with your methodology. How shall things be done, right, in the tool? You need to train people. Well, how do you training, right? So I listed those things and then went one level deeper and said, okay, what does it actually mean?
We'll talk about that a lot as we get into the actual how it works. So I don't want to give away too much right now, but I wanted to comment on what you're saying before, because I think it's interesting. We had this conversation, you and I, offline a little while ago, when we talked about the kind of services and products that are usually offered to organizations from vendors and consulting companies, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of consultancies out there who would like to offer you business advice. What should you do? Let's take a look at your case studies. Let's figure out what your market positioning should be. Let's do some strategic business advisory services. There are numerous firms out there that will tell you what your business should be doing and how it should be run. And then on the other side, there are lots of vendors out there who would like to sell you their products. And so what they generally do is they say, you pay us a fee, we give you a tool, that tool solves your problem. And no, neither of those actually solve the middle piece here, which is, how do you stand up a practice around turning platforms into business value? And that's sort of that connection is a loose fit, because on one side you have implementation teams that are very technical. The other side you have business strategy teams which are very theoretical or business focused, or not just theoretical, but like they're rooted in the business challenges, and the practice challenges are often left, I would say, to like passionate nerds who really like
Unspoken.
doing it, but
Unspoken.
they're like
Yeah.
unappreciated, or they're
Mm-hmm.
underappreciated. They're
Mm-hmm.
often very much defunded or depowered in the organization. They often don't have the ear of senior stakeholders because they're seen as a cost center rather than a mechanism of generating value. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the problems you're trying to solve is assembling a set of capabilities that allow those sorts of people to be powered up with the tools and techniques that they need to be successful in making that firm lock between technical capability and business execution. And
It's
that's really
yes.
cool.
Yeah. So I guess, yeah, you could see it that way. You could describe it this way. I also see a different aspect. All those two things that you just mentioned. You get the consulting organization and you get the platform from a vendor. Uh, this is not yours. This is rented, right? And we've seen in our wonderful SaaS and cloud world, we've seen now lawsuits against SAP, who don't want to open it. And the question is, who owns your data and all that stuff? And that is actually a second argument where I said, no, I don't want this. I built something and you own it. You own it. You don't have to ask anyone for what do you want to do with it. Just use it. But the other aspect that I've seen is you have your business consultants who want to do content with you. You have your vendors who want to give you their wares. But in all seriousness, none of that is yours. It's rented, right? The consultant goes away if you don't pay them. Um, the tool goes away if you don't pay your monthly fee, right? And in our little weird SaaS world, and I completely understand why people move that way and all those things. I see
Sure.
the pendulum swim back.
Yeah.
The
People want to
question,
own stuff again.
what is
And
property?
they also want to
Yes.
own knowledge. That's the thing that I think there was a huge trend in the 90s, 2000s, even 2010s, where people were outsourcing their knowledge. So, for instance, I watched, I was at a company for many years consulting with them, and I watched the entire BPM department was owned by, like, I didn't work for that company, I was consulting to them. And I was working with a project manager who was from another big consultancy, and the entire team was from that consultancy. And in fact, when I looked at it, of our team, I think there was probably 35 or 40 people on this team. I think there was only two people who actually were employees of the company, which meant that when we went away, nobody knew how to operate things. And actually, I had the experience of going back and seeing them. I think it was maybe like 6 or 7 years later, and nothing had changed. And the business had changed, but the practices and the processes had not been updated. It was all graveyard because they'd only bought temporary knowledge. The organization had gained no knowledge collateral as a result of that. And you're right, I see that changing. I see that moving back into the companies, back equipping that company to be its own process champion. That's
Yeah.
really important.
Yeah. I think it's this. In my mind, it's three things. It's the uh, you own it. It's a one-time purchase. It's yours, right? No matter what.
Sure.
It's built, as you said, it's built for a purpose, right? So you bring in that knowledge, you bake it in, and in many of those things you see it in the form of templates that are built in, right? On this, and then the third thing is it's local first,
Right.
right? So you run it either on a laptop, if you're really local, or you run it on a server behind the firewall, right?
Yeah.
But maybe we come to the target group,
Yeah.
and I hope I don't
So
kill your
who
outline
should
here.
no no please who should care about this kind of thing? Because I want to ask that in two parts. Number
Mhm.
one is what types of companies is like a BPM OS, which we keep calling it. We'll talk about exactly what it is later. But what types of companies should be most interested in this kind of approach? And number two is within those organizations, talk to me about the kinds of roles for which a BPM OS is very important.
Yeah. The scenario that I see almost every time when somebody starts, you got a handful of people, 3 people, 5 people, right? And they
Yeah.
have an idea and then they need to do something. And since they're so small, right, and the organization might be thousands of people, their importance might be relatively low, right? But if the organization is a little bit mature, and I had that with one client, when you were asking for tools, besides that you get asked for money that you should bring, they make you jump through the IT evaluation
Oh yeah.
process.
Yeah.
And in one example, that took literally 12 months, right?
Yeah,
So
and
now
the business problem is changed by the time you get the tool
the
you
the
needed to help
momentum
solve that
the
business
momentum
problem.
is
Yeah,
gone. The momentum is gone. And by the
it's
way,
gone.
the answer is after those 12 months is, yeah, we already got Jira. Where's your problem? Take Jira, and then
Hey, can
then
you
you
do it
end
with the
up.
O365 suite? Is that possible? Can you like maybe just use
Yeah,
Word?
no, that's same
Oh
shit,
boy.
Excel. But then in Jira, you end up with, if you want to create an issue, with 50 fields that you don't need, but nobody got time or interest taking them out for you because that's effort. You end up with a workflow that doesn't work for you, even though it's relatively easily configurable, but there's nobody there, right? And the purpose built thing goes away. It just becomes a hassle. And I had those conversations with colleagues, who just said, "Why? I just pressed the tab button 20 times and ta-da, look, I've created an issue." And I said, "Yeah, you still have 25 attributes in this thing that I don't need." You know, so you end
Yeah,
up there. So the target group is actually people, small team who want to stand up something without the tech overhead, right? They want to be
yeah.
quick, they want to be nimble, they want to have things in from a technical perspective as easy as possible. No
Hmm.
databases, no nothing, no um, big setup there. And I thought, okay, how could that relate? And the apps that I built, people will laugh now. It's HTML, it's JavaScript, it saves stuff as Markdown files and as JSON files, which actually I think is an SCGs, which actually is a benefit because you can run that damn thing on your Google Drive or OneDrive,
Yep.
and you get a backup. No hassle with databases and whatnot.
Yeah.
So
So it sounds to me like there's the teams that are interested in this, the organizations that are interested in this. Maybe they aren't the ones, the very large organizations with complex governance where they have a big powered team where process is really their driver and they recognize it. Instead, there are organizations, I've seen this so many times where they have, I always say the same thing, small team, talented, undergoing a Herculean effort to try and do the process
Mhm.
lift, despite the fact that they're not powered the same way a normal business capability would be. And I've seen that in organizations that are much larger. Oh yeah.
Which is 85% of the clients that I've worked with. And
Yeah.
by the way, I would be delighted to see you outgrow my little tool stack. Right. I will be the first.
Wow.
I will be the first to cheer you to say, "Hey, good job! You made it a thing in your organization." Right? Isn't that what we all want? And not just a little sidekick that somebody has. So if you're there, call me. I will give you a coffee or whatever, flowers or whatever. I applaud you for this. But for the majority of people, they still have the damn problem that they need to solve. So that
Okay.
is one target group, right?
Ah.
To say, okay, how do I do this, right, in my organization? There's two more, right? And one of them could be our friends, the consulting organizations, and you and I have worked for those big organizations, and I've worked when I was with that little audit company, even though we had all those professional tools, we did an app rationalization. And guess what? We did it in Excel and PowerPoint. Yeah. So this is obviously second target group, consulting organizations, who want to take that knowledge that's baked into those apps and use it for their clients. And then the third one is, and that might be a long shot, are vendors. Some of them might realize, oh yeah, our tools just do some things, but not the things around it. And for that, I've built it in a way that they can be white labeled. You can put in your colors, your logo, and all that type of stuff, and you just bundle with it. So three target groups for it. Sorry
That's a
for the
really good point.
interruption.
It's all right. This is the idea is here to understand who should be listening. So if that's not you, that's okay. Is something you should probably find out about because first and foremost, you could be interacting with those groups. And secondly, someday you could be part of those groups, maybe using a BPM OS. So Roland, we keep using the words BPM OS.
Uh-huh.
Talk to me about what are the core components of a BPM OS from a capability perspective. What do they
Yeah.
enable in your organization?
Yeah. So I'm at the beginning, right? So currently I have 6 apps. Each of those apps is purpose built, so some people might say very tight scope, um, but basically it does one thing and it does one thing right. Right.
Sure.
The apps are integrated with each other in a pretty lightweight way. We'll talk about that, I'm pretty sure, in the second
Yeah,
half of this
we have a
show.
whole how section. Don't worry
Yeah,
about it.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But
So,
let's talk
so
about the capabilities they enable before we get into the
yeah.
nitty gritty.
And the idea is without going into the individual apps, is to take that second layer. I said this is what the platform does that you buy from your vendor in a core circle, and then you have a second ring around it with all those activities that go around. You need to develop a strategy. You need to do requirements management. You need to do work planning. You need to do learning. You need to do whatever, right? So you have different use cases. And my idea is that I will build more of those little apps and then you assemble them. Imagine you had like a spreadsheet. You have the apps in column one, and then you have your use cases in the other columns. And then you assemble the different single functionalities that each tool has into a nice package. And I
Yeah.
started with the learning use case because that is obviously something that everybody needs to do. And when I worked for iGraphics, greetings to Ron, Rebecca, and Carolyn. We struggled with that, right? We bought a learning management system. Names shall not be named, but we weren't so happy with it. And then we had to do some stuff around it. And how did we do that? I drew, you might recall, I don't know, I have it in the book. I drew subway maps to visualize the curriculum in PowerPoint. I can tell you that was no fun, to make it look good. Or we were using Asana for the implementation of the trainings, to keep track of what it is, and then build a feedback form so that people could give feedback and say, oh yeah, there's an error, and then Ron was triaging it and all those wonderful things, and I took that learning use case because I obviously know what I'm talking about here, and applied the apps to that use case. But I'm already working on additional use cases where I see a couple of deltas to what is currently right now. And then obviously I'm also thinking about, without holding the book in the camera, I'm thinking about a successful process mining projects app. So if somebody says, oh, I like what Roland describes in the book, well, there's an app for it, and you can reuse it for your project. So, but that is all future, right? And the first release is obviously talking around the learning use case plus, right? And there's a little goodie in there as well.
Yeah, your apps have this like combination of apps that you sort of assemble like bricks to make what appears to be a house that is relevant for you. And I think that this also speaks to something that I see a lot in organizations, is that as they grow in maturity, they will need different capabilities enabled. I feel like where a lot of vendors fall flat is that their platforms are too massive, or their implementation project is too massive, and the capabilities that they're providing are beyond what that organization is ready to receive. And not that they're not going to use it, but even having it available to them creates a sense of like overwhelming pressure. Like there's too much we should be doing right now. We don't have the team, we don't have the knowledge to do it. I can't do it. I can't do anything.
It's the my way or the highway syndrome,
Yeah.
right? And
So start small and grow from there, right? That's the idea. Or start with
that is one
some
aspect.
combination of capabilities. Yeah.
That is one aspect, but the other one is, and you know what I'm talking about. You have tools who have built in a commenting or chatting functionality, right?
Yeah.
Which looks good in RFPs. You can check the box, but I've never seen anyone using that because they already have Slack and Teams or whatever. So they will never go into that functionality after the evaluation and the check the box, right? I'm asking myself the same question. Should I build a forum, as the knowledge base, right? Should I build a Slack competitor? And the answer is maybe not, because organizations have it. So why duplicate it? I'd rather would say, okay, how do we make it complementary? And that's the same for the architecture platforms that do some things very well, right? And some things that don't. It's the same for learning management systems that do some things well and don't do other things. And it's the same for those communication tools, right? So I think from a product perspective, it's the vision that you want to have to say, okay, what is it that I provide to the bigger picture, and what is it that you already have in other tools that are out there? Because I'm obviously, well, I'm arrogant enough, but I'm not that arrogant to say, oh, I do it better than Slack and Microsoft, because those losers, I can do that with Claude in half an afternoon. No. Even though I like Claude.
Hopefully this is intriguing everybody. The newest offering from What's Your Baseline, the exciting thing that Roland has been developing. Roland and I, we've been talking about this principle for quite some time, and you're actually bringing it into life. And I think that is very cool. And I wanted to turn it back to our audience, because how have you been approaching process and architecture as a discipline with the platforms and capabilities inside your own team to be able to track the work that needs to get done, ensure that everything is governed and managed, and actually reach out to the right people to communicate your messaging? Has it been successful? Have the tools you've put in place actually achieved their goals, or has it been overwhelming or underwhelming? Let's leave you for a moment to think about your experiences before we come back and talk about exactly how BPM OS actually works. Hey, happy day, yeah.
And welcome back. J-M, you're quite the investigative journalist today.
Ooh.
Continue.
No, Roland, I'm glad we're back here because frankly, I'm interested in hearing all the components of BPM
Mhm,
OS. Uh, and you mentioned you're developing apps. Fantastic. Nicely done. But I also want to see the whole vision. So stuff you have right now, stuff that's coming down the pipeline,
mhm.
all upon the fabric with which these components sit. Describe to me all the components of BPM OS. And I know you have product names for them, but let's use the product
Yeah.
name and the capability to tell me what am I going to get.
So maybe we start with the foundation of it. And the
Sounds
foundation
good.
of it, and I mentioned it in half jokingly in the first part, the foundation of it is basically just Node.js. Right. So for those of you who know a little bit, you just go to nodejs.org and it makes your computer run JavaScript wherever. It's a runtime environment.
Great.
And that is actually the hardest thing to install. Right. So download the right thing, press the install button, and there it is. Then uh, once that is up and running, either on your machine locally or on your behind the firewall server, because there was also a design decision to have passwords, but not a full-blown user management, right? Because we're working together as a team. Um, so based on that, once you have that up and running, you get, depending on what you will buy, you will get one or many apps. You know, the idea is, as I said in the first part, is to say, okay, each app has certain capabilities that you can use in different contexts. Learning is the first one that I looked at.
Right.
Requirements management is the next one. Workforce management or workload management is the third one, right? System implementation support is the fourth one, and so on and so forth. So the idea is to say, okay, how do I use the base capabilities of the different tools that are in there, but spice them up with templates, with the baked in knowledge that is then applied to the use case. And
Right.
that
So
could
it's
then
not like a blank sheet of paper. You have to start
no,
from
no,
nothing.
definitely not.
It,
Definitely not. That's not
it's
the
built so
idea.
you can push buttons and have them populate with some ideas on best practices from your experience.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you mentioned each one. Well, once again, please go through each. So you start
Okay.
with learning management. Let's start with
So
learning management.
so take a step back, JM, relax, put on your plaid jacket with the leather patches and your cigar and your well worn out leather armchair,
Who do you think I am? Like,
Well,
yes, Sherlock Holmes here at your service.
oh, I was thinking about you at the University of Toronto or whatever, the tenured professor who has seen
Oh
everything,
man,
you know.
that's not how University of Toronto rolls. Oh boy. I should like not bathe for a few weeks and stumble into the Bain Center for Information
Okay,
Technology
no, no,
half
no. Okay,
asleep.
forget it, forget this picture, get it out of your mind. So, but
I kid, I
in all
kid. It's a
seriousness,
great facility, but it is
yeah,
a lot of engineers.
yeah. So the first thing is, now I have something in my mind. Okay, the first idea is, you want to do that BPM thing, right? And you have tons of ideas, right? And you need to structure those ideas. So I built an app called Groundwork, and it's basically a brainstorming app where you get cards and stacks. You can stack the cards and you can put them into zones, right? To say, oh, yeah, I think this whole stuff is this thing, right? And this whole stuff is this thing, right?
Mhm.
And you can sort it out. And it has a brainstorm mode where you can type in very quickly all your ideas just to get it out of your brain and get it on the
Mhm.
canvas before you start sorting, right? And once you have a rough sorting, then you can switch into a planning mode. And then
Okay.
those zones, if you think about it, you have basically an unlimited canvas with cards. The cards have properties, like
Yep.
importance and Moscow and all those wonderful things that you put in, but not too much of it because it should be lightweight.
Yep.
So you have these things, but once you have that high level idea, those different fields, oh, we need in the learning use case, oh, we need a training for this and we need a training for
Mhm.
this. Oh, actually, we can combine them to this learning path, right? And then the learning path would be one of those zones, right? Then you switch into that planning mode, and then you're a little bit more structured. Each zone becomes a column, right? And then you go with your cards, your ideas, where you have your priorities and all those wonderful things, and you then plan it. You say, okay, what goes into my first release, the first version of this training? What goes in my second? What goes in my third, right? And that is then obviously you put some timelines in there. Phase 3 is in Q4 2026, right? So you can put it a little bit on the timeline to see what does it actually mean. And you get your rough 30,000 foot description of what you want to do.
That's
right?
amazing. This seems like a great thing to have in a facilitated session where you're capturing ideas from a lot of experienced
Yeah.
team members, putting them on a page that people can see together, and then also giving them a space they can asynchronously maneuver things around until you sort of form into a final strategic plan for how your team is going to execute against its ideas in this next
And we're getting,
cycle of run.
yes, and we're getting to and you can come back, if you add new cards that are not sorted out in that grid, well, there's an automatic showing up to be resolved zone. I forgot how I labeled it, So all those cards show up in that extra column. And once you've sorted them out into the columns and groups underneath, well, that column disappears, right? So
Awesome.
you keep track of that, Again, the idea is get it out of your brain, get it into on a page, and then get it into a structured format. Each of those things can be linked to a second app that I called Playbook. And the Playbook is in a nutshell a wiki, right? So you can create pages. On those pages, you can obviously put in text. You can do formatting and checkboxes and bullets and tables and graphics and videos and whatnot, right? So it's a full-blown container for content. So in our learning use case, you say, hey, I think we need a training for how to tie the shoelaces, right? Because you have a learning path that means little kids learn how to dress, right? So tying your shoes is important.
So groundwork turns into playbook with
the playbook,
what the wiki looks like for how we're going to do it.
The playbook now will have a special template for describing what that course is. Who is it for? What are the prerequisites? What are the content that will be learned? What's the can-do statement afterwards? What's the structure of that training? All those things. So you get a structured way of mapping it in a comparable way so that you have that one-page profile for each of your training courses. You could obviously use Playbook for other things. Think about stakeholder analysis, right? Think about capturing your process mining improvement opportunities or creating summaries of your findings, right? Or, which I will use obviously in a different product, put your damn method and conventions documentation in that wiki, right? Because in the wiki, like in every other good wiki, you can have categories, right? So you have a little tree on the side, right? And that tree can obviously turn into chapters, right? So that you have a structured way. So nothing earth-shattering, but it has that integration, right? Every page has a permalink. You can copy that permalink. You can put it in Groundwork, in Course Flow, in whatever. Wherever you can put a link in there, you can put it in. So first app, dumping your ideas, sorting, planning. Second app, Playbook, documenting knowledge, right? Having structured ways with templates to capture information, to have that reference base, knowledge base, if you will, right? Like a playbook in football. You have your different plays in the playbook. The third app, and that is, and Ron, if you listen, you will chuckle now. That is obviously scratching my own itch. That was, I call it Atlas, and it's basically creating a visual map in form of a subway map, right? And for those of you who have seen what I did for IGU, that was exactly the same thing, different lines, different stations on the lines, and where can you switch lines, and they're color coded and all that type of stuff. So if you've ever ridden a subway, you have an idea how a subway map looks like, right? And I spice it up with obviously each station can link back to a playbook so that you get your description, what's in the box for this,
Yeah.
for this course, right? But it also has a time aspect. So it can indicate, and it's time sensitive, it recognizes the computer time, where you say, oh, this course will be deprecated 2 weeks in the future.
Right.
So what happens is when that time comes, guess what? It will be grayed out. And it has a minus in the station symbol. You know, oh, there's an interruption. I need to do something. And the same thing is if you have a station that's in planning, and what it actually does there is not only show the symbol a little bit differently, but it will take the connections that are connected to that in planning station and make it gray and dashed, right? So that it's really obvious, like, yeah, there's something to be done, right?
That's a good visual indicator. And by the way, Roland, you and I have talked about this a lot, but to our audience, I mean, Roland and I very strongly believe in the subway map approach, particularly to learning management. And one of the things I think is most important about subway maps, and I think this is why they're really, really useful, is to understand the sort of transfer stations through which multiple courses pass. I think that's something that's really missed, particularly when you're looking at course development, is the reusability of assets between multiple lines, like a line being a course, and you kind of have to pass through the same stations at certain nexus points in multiple courses because that's fun, like foundational knowledge that is important to the discipline and applies to the technology. And that sort of intersection between the two is, I think, poorly captured in other ways of documenting courses. In particular, I like the way that subways do that, and the subway map is a really good way of creating that.
And don't do it. And I know everybody who listens to this point will, because I did it. Don't Google how to create a subway map in Illustrator. You will end up on a page called transitmaps.net, I think. It's a rabbit hole. I was there for 2 weeks. There's certain conventions, you know. You have, for example, a station where two lines intersect, right? Does that mean that that course, that intersection, is used by both? Or does it mean you walk from one platform to another? Right? You literally switch lines. You know what I mean?
We are getting into nerd territory, friends.
Yeah, it can be interesting.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it can be interesting. So
app
number 3.
Now we're in Atlas. Okay.
Yeah,
so,
Atlas. Right.
Groundwork, playbook, Atlas. Now let's move to app number 4. Yep.
By the way, just to have it said, your stuff in Groundwork, you can export it and you can import it into Atlas and other apps. So you don't have to type it again, right? So there's some lightweight integration being built in. The next app that I have is, and now I'm thinking about where to start. Okay. It's called Outline. All right. You got your map. You identified, I need a training to teach a kid how to tie their shoelaces, right? You visualize this in Atlas in a subway map, right? You've described on a super high level what's the content, who is it for, little kids, no prerequisites, you know, whatever. This is how you teach it. But now you get to the actual content. What is the content of that training, right? And now it breaks. Which PowerPoint slides do I need to create? You know, which videos do I need to create? What's the actual content that I want? And
your bill of materials for making the training effective.
Well,
yes.
Not from a doing perspective. That comes later. From a content perspective, you need to explain what a shoe is. You need to explain that the sole and the insole is something different, that you want to put that in. You need to explain what the shoelaces are, the little hooks that you go through. And then describe the shoe. Then you need to describe, well, what do you do with those shoelaces? You know, put them together, make a little bow around, whatever, right? How do you tie them? You know, you have maybe a section about troubleshooting. What happens if you put a big fat knot in your shoelaces and you can't get it off? Do you need to cry and ask your mama to come with a pair of scissors to cut it? Whatever, right? So in this case, we're talking about 3 different things, right? Which in a training could be 3 separate pieces of the training. You know, what is a shoe? Why do you need them? How do I make the damn bow, right? And what's the troubleshooting if I don't make a bow, but I make a knot? You know, Outline is basically, if you think about it, it's not like a mind map, but it's also a little bit like a mind map. So you have that main node, you have a level 2 that looks like an org chart, but then underneath you have that tree, right? Where you basically go and you sort out things on a level 3, level 4, and you can group things. So you have whatever training chapters and items, which might or might not be the content thing. But the ideas in outline, that's why I called it that way. You get the outline of your damn course, right?
Right.
And
That's why I'm
you
saying
can
bill
go
of
and say,
materials, or like knowledge bill of materials. Like here are the things here are the things you need to know for this course to have been successful.
yeah. So you have multiple hierarchies. You can put in certain attributes to the node. It has properties, whatever. You can put in things like times. Whatever, all those things. It comes with templates, right? So that you don't have a blank space, right? Again, the idea is to go this, and then you obviously can integrate it with other apps. So now we have, to recap, we have the brain dump in Groundwork. We have the high-level definition in Playbook. We have it visualized in Atlas. We have the low-level definition in Outline. So J-M, when do we start working? Right? So
we should
that
start
is,
working right now to start building pieces, but we can't just say go. How do we organize that work?
So that is an app that I named Course Flow.
Ooh.
And it basically does two things. One is it's a Kanban board for individual projects. So each project could be version 1 of this training, version 2 of that training, training number 2, training number 3, and so on. So each training course, whatever you do, becomes its own project. And then it's a Kanban board, obviously with the usual suspects in their columns. And you have cards, right? Which can or cannot be the same cards that you created earlier in Groundwork, right? Those cards obviously have properties, the importance. They can have tags, whatever, additional attribution in there. And the idea is obviously to say, okay, you can keep track of it, and you can use that tags, for example, to put in, oh yeah, J-M is responsible for that, or Roland is responsible for that, so that you can filter. Show me only the cards that have J-M as a tag, so that you see your stuff, right?
Yeah.
So I would use it that way. And I was heavily thinking, just as a food for thought, I was thinking, do I need a field? Who? And I thought, no, right? Because you can use tags for this. And then you can use the tags for other things as well. What is the area where it goes to? Chapter 4 or whatever you come up with, right?
You can sort by tags.
Yeah, keep it lightweight. That was the idea. So you have that Kanban board. Obviously, at some point, you have everything moved to the right. Everything is done. Hooray. Congratulations, training is done. But we don't end there. Because when everything is in the done column, well, you actually go live. Right? And what happens if you go live? People have feedback. Right? And you want that feedback.
Yes.
So it comes with a feedback form on a different URL, right? And this is where in all apps you have a little bit of user management. So they all have 3 roles: viewer, editor, and admin. And you obviously hide editor and admin from the mere models. They just see the viewer form, right? In this case, so which means they can't give the feedback. Okay. And once you have the feedback, well, you go back into the Kanban board, right? And you see a little inbox. And then someone like Ron, can triage that, right? And say, oh, this is the feedback, oh, J-M's course. And what would you improve in that course? Everything. What went well? Nothing. Any comments? Yes, fire that guy,
Yeah, so we should shorten the iterative timeline by creating an automated way for bringing that feedback back into a Kanban board and moving those cards to the left, right? That's going to be
the point is what Ron did in all seriousness at IGU was we said, okay, we're going to look at each course that we have at least twice a year. So now you get that feedback and you can prioritize it from 1 to 4, and we can discuss what those priorities are, from fix immediately, there's an error, to nice to have, right? And you can assign it to a new project. So you fill basically the version 2 of your course or version 3 of your course already with some feedback that you already have prioritized, right? So you sort that out. And then lastly, it has a status overview, because as you can imagine, you might have tens or dozens of courses in the air, right? And you want to know, where are we? So you see an overall dashboard where you see all your courses, and then you can click into one and you see the current status on where they are in the development lifecycle, with a little screenshot of the Kanban board on the bottom, so that you see the details for some status reports.
That's awesome.
That's course flow, right? What I didn't have in there is, and I said it in the first part, is what is provided by those specific tools. So you don't see things like, how do I handle registration for my course? How do I track attendance? How do I provide the email, the e-learning files? Because typically organizations have a learning management system for that, right? And I want to be complementary, right? I think we have that in it. So course flow, right? So complementary to learning management platforms and all those other things that you already might have. And then there's a last thing, which is also like the subway map was scratching my own itch. It's the same there. I don't know how you manage your tasks. Do you manage your tasks?
Well, poorly, I'll put it like that. How about that?
I tried everything. I tried apps on my phone. I tried stickies on my laptop. I tried stickies on paper. I bought little books and nothing worked. What I realized is the way how I'm thinking is in a week. So it's like, what do I need to do on Wednesday?
Yeah.
Right. And I built an app, which, by the way, will be free for individual use, that are called Cadence, right? In lack of a better term. So you got a cadence in what you do. So think about a week, right? You have Monday to Friday, and then you have another column for the weekend, but then you also do have rows in there, and you can have as many rows as you want. There's two rows that are always there. The first one on top of it is called daily, or daily items. Whatever you put as a task in there, and the task is literally a checkbox and the name. And then you can obviously put a link to Playbook in there if you need more details. You can make recurrence. You can mark it as important, but that's basically it. And you can delete tasks. Whatever is in that daily row will be automatically copied in the next weeks, right? So it's an auto recurrence, right?
Yep.
So you and I, for example, have a daily 8:30 chat in the morning. It's my first item every damn day, right? And I open a new week and I see Monday to Friday, 8:30, daily catch up with J-M, which I'm always looking forward to. So there's those two rows that are always there. The daily one with the recurrence, the to be sorted out with stuff that you don't know where to go.
Yep.
Yeah. And then you can have as many rows in between as you want for certain things. So the way how I have set up my personal cadence is I have a row for meetings, right? Where I just put in and I look at my calendar and say, oh, I need to talk to so-and-so on that day. Doesn't have any additional information because that's what calendars are for, right? Then I have a row which are called business, right? Those nasty things like talk with the tax lady, rebuild the damn website, find a new shopping software, whatever it is, fix our Nextcloud issues, right? So it's the personal things that I sort out, which are assigned to me for the business. And then I have a column and I labeled it work, which is actually the actual content, right? It's like, oh, develop this training, develop this app, describe that, do this, and you can take those items, you can move them around, you can check them off and all those things.
As you expand that out, now you start to see the collective efforts of each person. I think this is like, well, if I was like looking at product management teams, how important something like this would be for everyone knowing what's being worked on or what's allocated to each person.
I would see that it's slightly a little bit differently because that's what you have course flow for. Say you have 20 cards in that project and they have different names on it, but that doesn't describe when you as a person do it. But if you
Right.
go
Yeah.
to the place where you say, okay, each card in course flow has a tag called J-M, you can filter by J-M, you can export this, and then you import that into Cadence so that
Right.
you have your personal tasks there, and then you can put it in the weeks, right? And so on and so forth. And what it also does, it
Makes it achievable.
obviously, yeah, it counts your tasks in total, minus the ones that are in there to be scheduled. So they will be not used. And then it checks, how many did you check off? What's your percentage? How many action items can you get done in a week? Right.
Okay. So it
And you get
tracks
your
your like
little
velocity.
yeah, you get your mini statistics, if you will, right? And then
Right.
obviously you have open tasks left at the end of the week. I don't know if
Mhm.
you're obviously perfect, JM, but I have those. And it has a functionality to say, hey, copy all open tasks in the next week.
But then that also helps you with work allocation. So, for instance, if you're able to see how many tasks are allocated to different individuals, if you're trying to
Hmm.
balance a team, you can say, "Oh, like I actually see this person is getting a lot of things copied over. Now, like let's take a look at how their task list looks like. Oh my goodness, they are overloaded, and I didn't really understand that until in their cadence, I can see this isn't possible. Actually, we had that conversation literally last episode was all about customer success management and their
Hmm.
cadences. I can imagine if in your cadence you put all these tasks that involve you reaching out to different customers and the overflowed list just becomes continuously
Yeah.
refreshed. You can
Yeah.
see that that's going to be a problem early.
So the idea is it's free for personal use, right? So you can download it and whatnot. But you can get a team license, right? It's just a little license key, and then once you paste in the license key, you get another drop-down menu, just like the other projects. So you could say, okay, there's a cadence for JM, there's a cadence
Yeah.
for Roland, there's a cadence for whomever, right? And you could then sort it out, right? So
Right.
that's the 6 apps,
Yep.
right? So
So let's
groundwork,
go. Yep.
playbook, Atlas, uh, outline, course flow,
Course
and
flow.
cadence,
Yep.
right? They cover in my little governance picture, core and the outside. It covers one sliver, covers the learning use case, right? But you could easily see how you would use, for example, groundwork for requirements management. You could use playbook for describing more requirements. Uh, I could easily imagine that there will be another Kanban-like app for requirements management with different columns or different templates,
Mhm.
which is then different than course flow and so on and so forth, right? And that's actually from a product management idea is that the way forward to say, okay, now I covered that one use case. Now I go to the next. Now I go to the next. And then when you think about it in a spreadsheet, like I said before, the apps are in rows, the use cases are in columns.
Right.
Well, guess what? Which of those apps get used in which use cases, right?
Yep.
And to make it special, they will then have template packs that come with it. So, for example, you will get a requirement management specific template for Playbook. When you buy that bundle, you will get a learning specific one when you buy the learning bundle,
That's
right? Once
amazing.
it's there.
And actually, I wanted to ask you a bit of more detailed question about evolving these, because
Hmm.
you're talking about what release one looks like. As you're coming out with these, or I guess we've talked about this for a while. Like, by the way, folks, this is not new. This is I've been watching this stuff develop in the background over the past, I would say, 6 months. But between ideas and
Hmm.
implementation, we have a lot
Hmm.
more to go. How does this look from an evolution perspective? Like when I say take a look at the code that's being committed to these
Hmm.
apps, does this connect to something like a GitHub? Like how does this evolve?
Yeah. Yeah. So first of all, it's two parts to the answer. So every tool ships with some standard templates. So you don't get an
Right,
empty box. I didn't want this, right? So you
of
have
course.
standard templates that ship with the apps. You might have use case specific templates like I just said, learning management, requirements management, whatever it is. But you can create your own, right? And you obviously can export them. They're just damn JSON files, right? You can take those and create your own templates that then somebody else can use it, right? So
Amazing.
that is there. To your other question, since these are just files and not a database, you're looking at basic backup strategies, if you will. You put it on your Google Drive, your OneDrive, your Dropbox, or whatever your organization is using, Nextcloud, right? And it just backs up the damn files, markdowns, JSONs, SVGs, so nothing
Yeah.
is lost. If you want to go a little bit further and you want to have a version history, each app can be connected to a Git repository, either on GitHub or on GitLab, for the nerdy people here, right? So basically, whenever you do a change, each app will autosave, which is also another pet of mine. I don't want to press the damn button all the time, So whenever you do something in the backend,
Yeah.
it autosaves. Whenever you autosave, it does a commit, right? So now you can go #nerd alert into Git and see your version history and do the diffs and all that stuff, and you can see what has changed over time, if that is your vibe, right?
If that's your
Not
vibe,
necessarily mine. It's not necessarily mine, but
sure.
some people have that. But that
Well,
is
some
an
people
admin
want to see like
function.
what's being evolved and have this ability to track the lineage of the development of
Oh yeah,
capabilities within their own tools that provide capabilities for the organization. I want to take a moment to turn this back around to our audience, because the truth is here that when you think about these 6 apps, I mean, I want you to take a look inside your organization and yourself. How do you manage this? How do you do ideation? How do you create like data sheets and wikis? How do you create task allocations? Do you create subway maps for this kind of learning management thing? Or are you doing it using sort of requirements documents that are big old long words, and there's no interfacing between different stations that are reused? It seems like a lot of this would be done very manually. And I think for a lot of you, the answer might be like the Microsoft, the O365 suite. What does that give you? And also, what does that take away? Let's leave you for a moment to consider how you've been doing this. We'll come back with our final sections, our conclusions, and some information on how you can get your hands on BPM OS.
The wind will blow, but it's just changing. It's just changing. The wind will blow.
and welcome back, Jam. I guess it would have been better if you brought us back in, but anyway, I think you got some questions on your plate.
I do, Roland. I think so. First and foremost, this is fantastic. I love the six starting point apps for managing this kind of practice, or that turns ideas into action within a BPM team. And I think that, or in any team, right? But I think this is also part of the challenge in managing practice, which is something that people really struggle with. I mean, the conventional tools aren't really designed for the kinds of stuff you need to do to make process and architecture come to life. And when you shoehorn them in, or when you rely on a vendor who doesn't do it at all, like I'll give you a good example. I've worked with a few different tools in the marketplace that have zero project management capabilities, even though they sort of claim that they do. What ends up happening is the projects aren't properly managed, or they're managed externally, and there's no fit with between the people on the team and the people who are managing the project. It becomes a whole nightmare. Actually, when I was coming up in this space, the team I was working on worked well because we had somebody from the process team as the project control officer. So the project manager had that interface, but we were lucky. And I think
Mhm.
what you're trying to do is to eliminate luck as a required ingredient in successive architecture programs. And so I'm sure people are excited about that.
Yeah, I think it's what I've learned, that tiny little bit, what I learned, and just put it into bits and bytes, templates, approaches, and just share it with the next generation. But having said that, I
How
hope,
do you get a hold of that, Roland?
yeah,
How
I
do I
hope
find out more
somebody
about
is
it?
Yeah, I hope somebody's interested in all that stuff. And obviously, I did some teasers on LinkedIn. You might seen some screenshots and my little spiel around this. But then it's also obviously the show notes of this episode. I will assemble another PDF, with screenshots and what do those apps do and whatever, so that you can download it. And I hope, and I'm really crossing my fingers because right now WordPress is my biggest nemesis, because I'm redoing the What's Your Baseline website. And I hope when this episode goes live in 2 weeks from now, that we will have some product websites, and you can go to what'syourbaseline.com/BPM-OS and you see it. And then each app has its own sub website and you see the bundles and my idea how those things could evolve and all those things then on the website, which is obviously then more than that little PDF that's part of these show notes. If I don't get it done, because again, WordPress is my current nemesis, well, it will come. It will come.
And you can reach out to us, of course, because as Roland mentioned, you can get a free for personal use copy
Yeah.
of Cadence, which is really cool to help manage your personal tasks, the things that are on your list, and categorize them by when they need to get done and how you're going to keep them from falling off the track week over week. And this sort of leads us back to bringing people to the website and to What's Your Baseline's LinkedIn. I normally pitch the Patreon and the Substack. I will again. This is obviously a place for you
Still
to-
there.
Yeah, it's still there.
Still
Please
there.
come join us on those great ways to get in touch with us, great ways to find out more things. I mean, I got to tell you, I've been putting these like bonus videos up on Patreon. I'm loving them. They're funny as heck to me. Hopefully you'll find them funny too. But it's mostly full of unusual Roland Germanisms. If that's your speed, I think
What?
you'll enjoy that. But also for those of you listening, if you aren't subscribed to us or following us on LinkedIn, please do. It's free, and we love to see more people liking and like following along on LinkedIn. It also helps us with the LinkedIn algorithm to show you to more of your contacts and build this community here at What's Your Baseline. But please also go to find out more about these apps and things to what'syourbaseline.com/episode 114, because that's where you'll find out lots of things about here. But thank you so much for being part of our excellent community. I'm hoping you'll enjoy these new apps, What's Your Baseline and Roland is ready to offer. And we're excited to get feedback from you so we can integrate that into our feedback system and build even better apps. But until we hear from you, friends, and until we see you in the next episode, I've been J.M. Erlinson.
And my name is Roland Volt.
We will see you in the next one.